is the NBC newsroom in San Francisco. We take you now to Manila.
Hello, NBC. This is Bert Silan speaking from Manila. It is now 2:45 in the morning of December the 9th. Almost 24 hours since the word was received here that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands. It has been a nerve-wracking and hectic day, and since dark it has been a vigil of care and hope that enemy bombers would not come to disturb the peace and quiet of this moonlit city. But despite the order of total blackout, Manila has been bathed in brilliant moonlight since 10 o'clock by a moon that had only 2 nights before passed its full season. Deep down in our broadcasting dugout, we were suddenly disturbed by the wail of the air raid siren. At exactly 12:40 a.m., the first real air raid alarm since the opening of hostilities sounded in Manila. Minutes went by and no sight or sound of any enemy planes came to back up the siren's warning. It seemed hours, but was actually 1 hour and 5 minutes before the all-clear signal was sounded at 1:45 a.m. If enemy planes were near Manila, we have as yet received no confirmation. Contrary to a report made by another commentator in Manila today, the warning signal at 12:40 this morning was the first and only signal sounded up to this time. We would also like at this time to deny another report made from Manila to the effect that Japanese parachute troops had landed in the Philippines in an unknown area. The office of General Douglas MacArthur, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces in the prairies, not only emphatically denied the report, but stated that if such unfounded and unwarranted reports were continued by some commentators, a strict censorship would be slapped on all broadcasting emanating from the Philippines. I repeat, the Army headquarters emphatically deny that any enemy parachute troops have landed anywhere in the Philippine Islands. We have been listening with interest during the past few hours to reports from Tokyo and Berlin, and it can easily be imagined what the commentators in those countries are saying about America and President Roosevelt. A Berlin report has it that the transport General Hugh L. Scott was sunk 10 miles out of Manila. This, of course, is untrue, and if the General Scott was sunk or damaged, it was at least 1,800 to 2,000 miles away from these waters. In an order issued late tonight, Commonwealth President Manuel L. Quezon, in an effort to prevent the mad rush on the banks for withdrawal of cash money, stated that the limit of withdrawal by any depositor would be $100 during any 1 week, unless such depositor first secured a withdrawal license, which license would only be issued after good and sufficient evidence was submitted to prove that the money was needed for the carrying on of normal business or for other equally legitimate purposes. The Escola, Manila's main business street, looks like a row of summer houses due to the fact that all the plate glass windows of the storefronts have been latticed in most intricate designs with adhesive tape as protection against breakage from bomb concussion. Outside of the one short siren blast, the stillness of the starry night has been broken only by the sudden rush of mounted anti-aircraft units, rushing at almost breakneck speed through the darkened streets. Every now and then a troop-laden autobus goes dashing from here to there, and as soon as it is gone, the deathly stillness of a blackout night lays as a heavy mantle over this fair city. Vehicles of all kinds entering the approaches of all bridges are being stopped by soldiers in search of vagrant Japanese who have either evaded arrest or are known to be in hiding from the authorities. I have just listened with warranted American pride to the dramatic words of our president asking Congress to declare a state of war between the United States of America and the Japanese Empire. Listening to his words, I, as millions of others must, feel that the destinies of our country are in good hands. And I only wish you could have felt the thrill that I did when the strains of the Star-Spangled Banner floated through the ether 10,000 miles across the American continent, across the Pacific Ocean, and into our little dugout here in war-ridden Manila. To us in this far-off country, the American flag is more than a red, white, and blue emblem. Today in Manila, the stars and stripes have been flung from every flagpole, on every building, in every plaza, and on the masthead of every ship. As one fellow American told me earlier this evening, his flag was hoisted to the top of the mast and was going to remain there until victory had been won. It is in this spirit that Americans and Filipinos alike are putting their shoulders to the wheels of defense. A defense which we know in a short time will turn into an offense that will only end in the complete annihilation of the ruthless partner of an even more ruthless dictator. Until 6:45 p.m. New York time, this is Bert Silan saying hasta la vista. I'm returning you now to the NBC.
Thank you, Bert Silan in Manila. Now we present Upton Close from San Francisco.
Now, in the cool of the morning, after yesterday, the fantastic day when war broke out in the Pacific, we begin our summaries of the war picture. We suffered scattered and jagged wounds in the surprise attack in the Pacific. At Honolulu, especially if it be true that 2 capital ships are gone. However, we wait with assurance for some word of what our bag has been in this conflict. We're sure that the United States Navy has a bag, too. And probably it includes some of the best Japanese commercial vessels. There'll be more fine tonnage for us and for England. We wonder where the Tatsuta Maru, the prize ship of the Japanese merchant marine, is. It was on its way over here to bring back the consuls and the embassy officials. Now, the reports are all unconfirmed. Midway has been attacked. Guam is encircled. That Wake is gone, taken by the Japanese. Well, if these are true, they're all as expected in the case of a surprise attack in the Pacific. It means, of course, at the present time, our communications with Manila and with the Orient generally are out. They're in the hands of the Japanese, for there are no ships running across the sea, save naval ships. And the Pan American Airways has lost, or its base at Wake, probably, and Guam and Midway may be impossible to use. It seems that Litvinov is the last plane that came over. The last to come maybe for some time. However, all of these actions on the part of the Japanese are hit and run, save for one, so far as we know. There is only one military action so far that has first importance. That is the landing of a Japanese army on the Kra Peninsula in southern Thai, or Siam. That is very serious. That cuts the British area, Burma and Laos put together, in 2. It is much to be deplored that the British did not occupy and hold that narrow peninsula that lies between the Gulf of Siam, which means the Pacific Ocean, and the Burma, the Indian Ocean. The British did not get in there first. That seems too bad. We'll have to watch out what happens about that. We don't know what's become of our people in Japan and China. We've been unable to get national broadcasting companies representative in Japan, of course. The important things to watch for are, first, where does Russia stand? Still no indication at all. Even though the new ambassador, Litvinov, is now in Washington, no indication. Very, very interesting that Japan chose not to attack her old enemy, Russia, which was the easiest to attack and the nearest, but rather to attack her strongest potential enemy, the United States, on the other side. The next thing to watch now, where does the next blow come from? We may expect it will come from the other end of the axis. We might watch out for possibly a full-dressed invasion of Britain on the part of Germany. Meanwhile, the Japanese on this coast are still conducting themselves well. There's no record yet of sabotage. The police have everything well in hand. There's a policeman with a gun in front of every Japanese shop here in San Francisco. Up in Fort Lewis, the boys who were recently mustered out of the Army for age are calling in again. This coast is a wide awake and alert. And so we close our summary of the first night of the Pacific War.
This is the NBC newsroom in San Francisco, returning you now to New York.
This is New York, the NBC newsroom, and we have just received this dispatch from Los Angeles. Richard Graves, director of California State Council of Defense, said today that he feared 2 Japanese aircraft carriers might be lurking off the California shores. We fear an attack on the Los Angeles area any hour, any day, said Graves, preparing to make a report to Governor Talbot Olson. Before the clocks in the halls of Congress had ticked away 1 hour today, President Roosevelt stood up before the joint session of the two legislative bodies. He had stated the case of the United States attacked by Japan. He had asked for a declaration of war. The president's grim report to the Congress lasted scarcely more than 5 minutes. Then war resolutions were offered in the House and in the Senate. In the upper house, the senators were first to get down to the task of marking down their votes. 82 members present, and each senator gave forth with an aye. The vote was unanimous, for war. Over in the House, just as the Senate voted, the Speaker began tabulating the House ballots. And history repeated itself in the case of the lady legislator from Montana, Representative Jeanette Rankin, the Republican. She alone, among all the members of the House, voted no, voted against the declaration of war. But the final tabulation was 388 to 1. Only this lone vote stood as a barrier to unanimous feeling in the two houses of Congress. Only 57 minutes after President Roosevelt began speaking, this country was officially at war with Japan upon request of the President, upon the vote of both houses of Congress. The first official statement on the war has come from the White House. Casualties in Hawaii are admitted to be greater than at first supposed, about 3,000, with approximately half of this number fatalities. But the White House says the Navy has suffered less than appeared at first. One old battleship capsized, apparently after being bombed. A destroyer was sunk. That is, 2 ships. The White House reports that several other warships were damaged. Now that contrasts with the Japanese claims that 2 battleships were sunk, 4 other capital ships damaged, and 4 cruisers hit. Even before the United States cast its power into the war, the government of Prime Minister Winston Churchill had put England into the war. Churchill's declaration in the House of Commons was cheered to the echo, and he revealed that the government of the Netherlands, the power that governs the East Indies, already is fighting alongside the British. On the side of the United States, there also is the Dominion of Canada, the Commonwealth of Australia, the regime of Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek in China. And one of the later bulletins brings information that the Free French government of General Charles de Gaulle has also cast its lot in with a democracy. And down in Central America, Costa Rica and Nicaragua have been joined by the island of Haiti, Honduras, in Central America. In Guatemala, the president has asked his legislature for a declaration of war against Japan. The United States, even now, is rapidly going on a war basis. 736 Japanese aliens were arrested last night in the United States and Hawaii, and are now in the hands of immigration officials and will probably be interned for the duration. Now, this refers to Japanese aliens, not American citizens. And President William Greene of the AFL says there will be no more strikes in his union if the AFL will make its anti-strike policy 100% effective for the duration of the war. And the Federal Security Administrator, Paul V. McNutt, has wired the governors of all the 48 states to get ready to relieve suffering growing out of the war. It isn't known just yet what that would entail. And from Washington, Senator Chandler said today that he had called the War Department to volunteer for active service in the hostilities with Japan. Now the news of the Russian front. The Reds have forced the German government to admit that it does not expect to capture Moscow this year. The German army reports that the Russians are still on the counteroffensive in front of Moscow, and that gives the lie to Adolf Hitler, who once stated that the drive on Moscow would be the last great decisive campaign of 1941. And from New York comes word that the Navy has announced that the need for men in the service is critical, and that all Navy recruiting officers in the city will remain open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. The age limits are 17 to 50 for enlistment. And just a reminder, just 1 hour from now, you will hear Prime Minister Winston Churchill speak over these stations. These bulletins and news reports have come from the NBC newsroom in New York. This is the National Broadcasting Company.